Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Weekly Brief. This is brought to you by the Maine School Management Association. It's your weekly look at what's going on in the legislature. This is the week of April 28th. I should say I am Robbie Feinberg. I'm the Director of Communications and Government Relations at the Maine School Management Association. We're coming off of April break. It was a break for you all as school leaders, hopefully, but it has not been a break at the legislature. We are rapidly going through bills right now. It's really peak time at the legislative session, really dozens of bills being heard per week in every single committee. So it is very busy. So we'll catch you up with where things stand. We'll give you an update on where things, what bills we're expecting moving forward. And then we've also got an update on the People's Veto effort, which we know a lot of you have had questions about. So I want to start by sharing my screen to get you ready. So I'll share it right here. And so let's start off with just what you need to know. So we're going to get into three big issues here. The first is the People's Veto effort. What would this mean for Maine schools and for Maine communities? We'll next go into a few committee votes that did happen over the course of the last few weeks. Most that we were really encouraged about around bills on curriculum overreach, bills around liability of schools and superintendents did have positive votes in their favor. So we'll get to that in a bit. And then also we will get to bills coming up this week, hearings around school finance, other bills that are important to keep your eye on. So we've got plenty to go into. So let's start with a little bit about the People's Veto effort, what you need to know. So a lot of you have asked about this People's Veto effort. Just as some background, a few months ago, at this point, the state did pass what was called a continuing services budget. What this basically was it was keeping services going along at a baseline level for the next 2 years compared to what they were over the last 2 years. So basically what that is doing, it is just funding state government various operations over the next 2 years at a baseline level. The goal, as described by Democrats in the House and Senate, was really to keep the lights on. There was a lot of uncertainty about what would happen with the budget. The goal of this, as they described it, was really to ensure that state operations would continue over the next 2 years. That would run from October of this fall, October 2025, through September of 2027. It's important to say that that budget did include 55% education funding. There were very few initiatives included in that budget that hadn't been included previously, but they specifically included extra money in order to ensure that the state would provide 55% of education funding for the next 2 years. Over the past few weeks or months, there has been a new effort that has come about to launch a people's veto. This is basically a ballot referendum campaign. They're working on getting enough signatures so that they could potentially veto this bill at the ballot box. Basically, ask the voters, do you approve of this bill at the ballot box? It would happen in November. And voters would get to decide basically, do we support this budget or do we vote it down? This is really, from our understanding, almost never been used for a budget before. We've seen this in various other ways. If you remember, there was a big people's veto around a vaccine effort a few years ago. We have certainly seen this in other ways, but never really about a budget. We're really kind of in uncharted waters here if this did continue, but we wanted to give you a general understanding of what this would mean for education, even simply getting this on the ballot, what it will require to get this on the ballot. So we're going to walk you through a few things here. So first thing to note about this People's Veto effort, it will be very difficult for supporters to get the required signatures onto the ballot by June 18th. That is their deadline when they need to get signatures in order to get this People's Veto effort onto the ballot for November. So they would need to get more than 67,000 signatures in order to get this onto the ballot. That is a lot. They probably would need additional ones above that because probably all of them aren't going to be necessarily verified. So you'll probably need to get additional even beyond that 67,000 as well. So that's a lot to ask, particularly because we don't have any big elections or, major major polling events happening over the next few months. That's typically how ballot campaigns are able to get a lot of their signatures is by, waiting outside of a polling place during a big election and asking people, hey, would you like to sign this petition? We're trying to do this sort of work. And typically they're able to do that at a certain election time, things like that. That is not in place right now. We don't have any really big elections happening by June 18th, meaning that it will probably be more difficult to get all of those signatures onto the ballot within, as you hear, by June 18th. That's a very tight timeline. But again, it is obviously not impossible. There could be enough signature gathering, there could be enough organizing to certainly make that happen. So we don't know exactly how that will happen, the chances of it happening, but it certainly could, but it is more unlikely because of those factors. In terms of its actual effect on schools and state operations, what we know is that it would be incredibly disruptive across virtually every part of Maine. If there were enough signatures to make this onto the ballot, what that effectively does is that once those signatures are submitted, what that petition is submitted, it would effectively make that bill, the budget bill, not in effect for that time. It would be suspended until there is an actual vote on the people's veto. So that would mean that effectively this bill, which provides funding beginning July 1st, that funding would effectively not be there. We currently aren't aware of any sort of alternative budgets that would be going into place. There's no alternative budget that we have seen that the Appropriations Committee has necessarily taken up publicly, anything like that. So that would basically mean that there would be effectively a government shutdown still. Their vital state funding would essentially be shut off. This would also include, obviously, funding for schools. This would mean that 55% funding for schools would not be there for that time. It is really important to understand as well, this isn't just going to affect schools. This is going to affect the entire state. It would go far beyond education. This would affect schools, this would affect universities, but it would also affect things like healthcare payments. It would affect things like state parks being open. It would affect all kinds of different areas. I mean, it would go far beyond. BMVs likely would not be able to be open as well through this. And so the disruptions would really be felt all across our state if ultimately this did make it to the ballot with no alternative as well. That is a real concern that is being expressed. Oh, another piece as well is revenue sharing as well for local towns. So there would be real consequences here, again, all across our state if this happened. So again, that would happen beginning in July. And from what we have heard from the Attorney General's office, that could potentially last until December or even into January. Basically, that would, it would last at least until the November election in November. But then there would have to be a verification period, even if during that people's veto election, even if voters voted to keep the budget as it was in November, there would still have to be a verification period, and then the governor would have to issue a proclamation. And only after all of that would the budget be able to finally go into effect. So this could last until December or even into January. So again, this would be really uncharted territories, that level of extended shutdown would be really consequential, obviously, across our whole state. We expect that there could be some opportunity for the legislature to reconvene during this time and craft a new budget. We're a little unsure. I think even the Attorney General's office is not necessarily sure of exactly how the legality of all of this would work. But it's important to note that this would be really disruptive across the entire state if this did happen. So what we are encouraging you to do now is, share with people about the effects of this. Tell them about how disruptive this would be for schools. Again, we emphasize that, this is unlikely but not impossible to happen. So we will see what happens with it. But again, this would be incredibly disruptive across our entire state. It would affect municipalities, towns, cities, schools, hospitals, really such a wide range of operations across our whole state. So it would really affect things. So we hope that you can use that if you're asked questions from your school board, if you're asked questions from your community, your staff. Hopefully that's a helpful way of being able to understand this and understand what its effects are. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can find my email on our website. I'm happy to share what I know about this issue and can help to tell other folks about it as well. So now going into the legislature and what is going on in the legislature, we've got some updates for you. So the big news is that during last week, the week of April 21st, school vacation, we had some, real strong successes in terms of bills that were killed that would have seriously affected public education. We wanted to highlight just a few of them because, frankly, things are moving so quickly that it might take me an hour or 2 hours to go through every single bill that we are watching, but a few big ones. So first, this is LD 1222, and this was a bill that would have had serious, recourse, would have had serious effects on school operations and specifically superintendents. This would have basically amended the state's Tort Claims Act, which provides some level of qualified immunity for school districts and for all governments of all kinds to ensure that they are protected from certain kinds of you might describe them as basically nuisance lawsuits to ensure that they can do normal operations. This bill would have had real dire impacts on that from the way that it was originally worded. A lot of even just basic things at a school, a kid kind of tripping and maybe hurting themselves. A school could maybe get sued for something like that. There would be real repercussions. It also intersected with the state's mandated reporter laws, but frankly, there were a lot of questions and complications about what this would be. We are thankful that the Judiciary Committee overwhelmingly voted against this in a work session last week. They voted 11-1 against this bill, and even that one vote, he said that the bill as it stands, he did not feel like it was a good bill. Which he shared, but he wanted to give a chance for potentially some amendments or something like that. But this bill really got defeated quite handily in the Judiciary Committee. We're very pleased by that. It means that there likely is little chance of this making it through the House or the Senate at all. Another bill that we wanted to highlight was LD 660. This was a bill, the title, sounds fine. An act to provide transparency, public access to curricula. I know a lot of our schools are already, doing a lot of this sort of work, but this would have imposed a lot of really what we would have expected to be expensive mandates on schools. It specifically would have required the recording of all professional development sessions for a school district. This, we know a lot of you can't even record your school board meetings because you don't have the proper equipment and the proper, staff to do that kind of work. So this would have been a huge ask. There also would have been a requirement for every district to develop basically an online portal of all of their curriculum materials and basically anything associated with developing their curriculum and materials. It would kind of have to be constantly updated because obviously curriculum change, we changes are made quite frequently to this. So that would have been a real concern. And again, another mandate that would be imposed on our schools. This one was thankfully voted down as well in the Education Committee that we are pleased about. One bill that we did want to place on your radar is LD 11. This is an act regarding temperature standards for school buildings. What this bill proposes to do is to basically it would require that school districts, it would put it into law that they have some sort of policy around basically minimum or maximum standards for school buildings, minimum maximum temperatures. What this bill It does not require any sort of maximum or minimum. It doesn't set any requirements. It just says you have to have some sort of policy around this kind of work, around kind of building temperatures. And we know some schools already have this. I know Portland has a pretty good policy already. This exists in some other states. This bill, we were opposed to it because we felt that it would be a mandate, but not, the most concerning anyway of these because it would just require really the adoption of a policy, could be set at whatever. There's a huge amount of flexibility in regards to that. This bill actually passed unanimously in the Education Committee. You so rarely see a unanimous vote, but this one really did pass unanimously in the Education Committee. That means we likely will see this, fare well in the House and the Senate. We will see what happens with it. We will continue to, advocate for this within the House and the Senate, but it does likely mean that it will fare well. So we wanted to place this on your radar. It could have implications for you in the years to come in terms of developing a certain kind of policy. What that looks like, I know we're working on, maybe some potential policies and just conversations in our own organization. So just wanted to place that on your radar. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that in the months to come. Now, in terms of what we are expecting for this week, we wanted to just highlight a few bills that really stand out to us that we would love your support and advocacy on. The first one is Tuesday at 1 p.m., and this is a bill on unallocated fund balances. This may not sound like a very exciting subject necessarily, but basically, this is a bill that would keep in place a statute that has been in place for roughly the past 4 years or so. So in 2021, the legislature passed a law increasing a school's unallocated fund balance that they could carry from 1 year to the next. And they raised that from 3 to 9%. This was really in recognition of the volatile financial picture that so many schools do face every single year, particularly during that time. There were obviously COVID funds that were coming in, but we know that this happens all the time. We know about the unexpected costs of special education. We know about unexpected costs of maybe additional mandates of federal funding changes. There's a real variety of things, and an unallocated fund balance really allows a district to be able to have a kind of rainy day fund, you could call it that, but really allow them to, maybe limit property tax increases if they're able to really just have some control from year to year over their financial picture. Well, in June, that threshold, that 9% threshold, that is set to drop down to 5%. And 1103, LD 1103, all this would do is simply keep that at that 9% threshold moving forward. We feel like this would be a really vital piece of legislation to help a lot of our districts maintain that financial flexibility. As we mentioned, there is still so much unpredictable in terms of budgets. Federal funding, obviously, so many of you are feeling, but also even state funding from year to year. We have seen changes in valuation, the way that that has impacted state funding for a district from year to year. Unallocated fund balances, they allow you to be able to really have an alternative necessarily to just layoffs and cost cutting. They allow you to say, okay, we can maybe keep that property tax increase low while still preserving certain positions and programming that we know are important because we are able to really maybe take some of our fund balance and use it for a specific purpose. It's a really important tool that we really do have to help to preserve educational programming while maintaining and acknowledging, obviously, the financial constraints of our communities. This is a core role of school boards and superintendents is balancing those two things, and unallocated fund balances make that possible. So again, the hearing on this bill is on April 29th on Tuesday at 1 p.m. as well. There's going to be another bill as well. This is LD 1518. This is a bill that our organizations actually oppose because we think it would actually restrict local school district flexibility in this process as well. Feel free to reach out to me if you'd like details about that. We would love if you could share your stories about how this has been useful for you, what this bill would mean for you. You can go to the Maine Legislature's testimony website to submit testimony. It's mainelegislature.org/testimony/. I'm also happy to get that link to you however you want, but it's always welcome to have local school district stories about how this is impactful for them. A few other bills to watch as well. On Tuesday, there's also a bill that would increase to 100% the state share of funding for special education costs for all school districts. Now, this is an important bill, basically an LD1, which passed basically 20 years ago, if not, even before 20 years ago. This was the LD1 was the bill that mandated that 55% K through 12 obligation for the state. It also mandated that the state would provide 100% of the state share for special education for every district, at least that much. And obviously that's really important for those minimum receiver districts who don't get, almost anything from the state, obviously, but they do get that help for special education. We feel like this is really important because of the volatile nature of special education spending, how it can change so quickly from just even week to week or month to month. And so this would be really helpful for schools to be able to count on the state to cover those costs and really help for school budgets as well. Also wanted to highlight on Wednesday, there are some bills around school budget referendum. One would actually abolish the referendum process. Another would amend it to require that the budget referendum question actually say the number of the budget, the actual budget amount on there. That's LD 1586. We're opposed to that just because we deem it really unnecessary. This is already available at every single polling place. They have full information there that you can look at of breaking down the cost centers. A lot of them also include the changes, the percentage changes from year to year in terms of the cost of these sorts of things. So we deem that as unnecessary. And then also on Thursday, May 1st at 10 a.m., there's also a bill around implementing the recommendations to look at expanding public preschool and early care. Superintendents were really involved in this commission. We had two different superintendents on this commission who worked hard and looked at this issue of how to expand pre-K. And we know that a lot of districts have had real success when they have been able to do that in terms of preparing kids for kindergarten, for first grade, really helping them transition, helping them with their behavior, helping them with academics as well, getting all kids to that same standard as well. So this would help to provide more money for preschool development grants along with some other changes as well. So if you'd like to speak out on that as well, that is Thursday, May 1st. I'm happy to share information with you as well about potential talking points or information for that bill. Then also wanted to highlight just on Friday, there are also going to be work sessions and potential committee votes on bills around cell phones, bills that would ban cell phones, bills establishing a pilot program that would look at ways of limiting cell phone use, lots of different bills that will be heard on Friday. We will certainly be there. We know that the feelings are different really across a lot of different districts. Some really do just want to ban cell phones. Others feel differently as well, which we acknowledge. So we will see how the state ultimately decides on this and how the legislature feels. So again, that's Friday, and we will have more information for you on Monday on how those work sessions end up. So that's everything for you for right now, and we will have plenty to share with you for next week as well. Again, we always appreciate your support and your advocacy and your work for public education. We will have more to share with you next week. But for now, thank you so much.